Okay.
Welcome here. Thank you for
you.
making time.
Thanks
we
for having
appreciate
me.
it very much. And Tom's going to kick it off.
So, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have a chance to talk with you.
Yes.
So let's start with what's the job of the city manager? What is it that a city manager is supposed to do?
Sure. So the city manager is the administrative head of government. As city manager, you are responsible for the day-to-day operations. You serve at the pleasure of the city council. You're appointed by them, and it's your job to manage the city. An easy way to think about it is you're the CEO of the municipal organization reporting to a board, which is your city council.
And so what scope of responsibility or issue or action does that cover?
So it really covers anything related to city operations you are responsible for. If it's a in-house service that the city is providing, even if it's a contract service the city is administering, that there's responsibility for that as well. You're in charge of managing the contract. The sheriff's department would be a great example, our biggest contract. You're responsible for implementing and enforcing the ordinances that are adopted. You are also supposed to be
City ordinance.
That's right.
That's a law. City law.
That's right. That's
City
correct.
ordinance,
The
okay.
Ojai Municipal Code.
Yeah.
And you're responsible for making sure that that's followed.
The code enforcement that comes with that as well.
Who's
Absolutely.
responsible for the definition of those laws? Or
City
those
council.
ordinances?
City council with let's take a step back. The best practice would be an ordinance is a legal document, component, instrument, if you will. So the best practice is the city attorney would write it under policy direction from the city council, because ultimately the city attorney is the one who has to defend it. So it has to be the words that they would choose to defend.
It'd have to be legally sound, for example.
Legally sound, right? City manager, it's your job to enforce what your council has directed, your city attorney has written, your council has adopted. I'm responsible for implementing and if it's appropriate, enforcing.
So enforcement would be like on the short-term rentals. If we
Yes.
say, here's the ordinance about a short-term rental that can't be below this amount of days, their job would be to penalize somebody who was breaking those rules.
And the development of the ordinances
Yes.
is up to the city council.
Yes.
What if they conflict with a county ordinance or with a state or a federal ordinance?
Sure. So as a city, right, there is a hierarchy. It's where you sit. And of course, anything federal trumps anything, usually state trumps anything. County and the rub between a county and a city is geographic, right? So, the city has your own incorporated boundaries for which you're responsible. Anything outside those boundaries usually belongs to the county in that area.
So
or
we're
another
odd
city.
in that our city is actually quite small
Tiny,
within our general community. If you
Yes.
say I moved to Ojai,
right.
you might even include Miramonte and
Sure.
Miners Oaks
I
and the Upper Valley.
Yes, I say I live in Ojai, but in fact I'm just outside the city
Your
limits.
address is Ojai.
Your address is Ojai, but
Yes.
the actual city of Ojai population is a relatively small subset of the larger.
That's correct.
Does that strike you as problematic?
No, very, very normal. Ojai punches above its weight as far as influence and attraction, right? I mean, the Ojai Valley, the greater Ojai Valley area, Ojai is the predominant.
It's the seat of the valley.
That's right.
But I live in the East End.
Yes.
And I can't vote.
Yes, and that's unfortunate for you.
Yeah,
And I can't vote either, actually.
because of where you live.
That's right. That's
So
right.
shouldn't we change that?
No.
Why not?
Well, you have to draw a line somewhere, right? And this comes to the legislative process, and you need a good definition. And if the definition is not simple, easy, one that everybody can understand, then it becomes problematic. It's really easy for someone to understand that this side of the street is Ojai, this other side of the street is not Ojai. I live here, you live there. Sorry, the cookie is crumbled.
There have been movements to try to get the unincorporated valley into the city limits, but
Right.
they didn't want to do it because Ojai was stricter than the county.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, a lot of people
You do have that type of
object
situation.
to the city of Ojai's judgment
I'm sure.
sufficiently
I'm sure.
that they're happy to not be
I'm
in the
sure.
city, so they don't have to put up with what they think
Right.
are not good rules.
Well,
It's
can I
true.
ask two questions?
Yeah.
One would be, when we talk about the county and the city, just for clarification, the county can decide, for example, we think that the limit on short-term rentals should be, let's say, 30 days minimum, and the city of Ojai could say 90 days minimum for a short-term rental. They can coexist, but somebody would have their Airbnb outside of the city limits would have a different rule. So they're not the same, but they're not contrary.
So it's that geographic distinction
Yeah,
I was
okay.
drawing, because they're both local governments.
Yeah.
It's not that one's mightier or greater than the other. Right, but
Yeah.
but a difference would be, you know, a law at a state level or a federal level. You know, in general, but not always. In general, you know, the state would need to follow the federal rule, and the city and county would need to follow the state and the federal.
You do want to cooperate with the county as much as you can.
County is one of our most, if not our most important relationship.
Yeah, okay.
Because, you know, not only are they our public service provider as far as our contract with the sheriff, but of course on the property tax, we all, those of us that own houses here, pay for our fire suppression services. But they're also the social service network in the area. That's a county responsibility. That's not as much a city responsibility, although you do see us bleeding a little bit into that, especially with the unhoused encampment. But I mean, as far as available resources, county is the most logical. The other thing is, of course, we have a very collaborative and willing partner in our supervisor. We've got somebody that wants, you know, to champion, you know, for Ojai and work with Ojai. So yeah, we should absolutely be taking more advantage of that.
Yeah.
Seems to me one disadvantage of this structure is that a lot of people feel kind of alienated. That is, they say, there's a city council election coming up. I can't vote in that.
Oh, people that are outside the city limits?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot of people. That's the majority.
Yeah, yeah.
So the majority of the community, I mean, if it's advantageous to have a community feel like a community, meaning feel like we're all connected in some way, we share a common interest, we're all in this together, we have common goals, we'd like the place to flourish, we'd like our kids to get educated, we'd like it to be safe, we'd like it to feel like we're doing something that matters in some way. Okay, but you can't vote.
Well, so voting is not the only way that you can make a difference and you can be involved. And so another example is you can be on a city commission and not be a city resident.
That's right.
So that's a
Can
city.
you be a city council member?
You cannot.
Yeah, you'd have to live in it. You
Have
have to
to-
live in the city and
Right.
in the district,
But
unless you're the mayor.
But you know, city advisory boards are, you know, advisory bodies to the city council and to the city, and they're very influential and impactful.
I was
in
going to
that.
say the nonprofits, which I was going to ask something about later, but we have so many vibrant, robust nonprofits. I see those nonprofits spanning the city, and a lot of people work that way to affect the kind of change you're talking about. And same, like for example, Casitas and Ojai Unified are overlaying bodies that go way beyond the city. They include the valley, so it seems to me we're always having those dual relationships.
Well, and I will tell you
way.
just from my own interaction
Yeah.
with these council members here, I mean, just because you don't live in Ojai doesn't mean that you're not getting somebody's ear or attention. I've
That's
had
certainly true.
several meetings already with people that don't live in Ojai, that have an issue or a concern, and you know, it might be regional traffic or things that you know, are maybe not immediately within Ojai, but definitely are impactful to Ojai that I need to be aware of.
Just one technical thing too, I want
Sure.
to clarify. I think I know the answer to this, but I want to check. As far as personnel, staff personnel, I see this kind of as an X shape. You're right here, the council hires you,
Yeah.
and all the staff reports to you,
That's
not
right.
the council.
That's
Okay.
right.
Got it.
That's right, and that's the council manager form of government, and that's very deliberate, so that you don't have every city employee all of a sudden have, you know, 6 bosses, their own boss, and 5 council members. So council only has 2 employees, me and the city attorney.
Got it.
So,
And I thought of him as more like a contractor.
well, he is
Okay.
well, technically we're both on contracts.
Oh, okay.
I'm a city employee, he is not, but you could have a city attorney that's in-house.
Okay.
Is that advantageous?
I don't think so. I think with a smaller city, it's always better to have a city attorney on the contract, because then you get the advantage of a bigger firm with additional resources. You really mostly see city attorneys in-house only in the larger cities, where they actually have a city attorney department, where they might have an assistant, a deputy, some paralegals, and they've got some breadth to do things. But
So what makes the difference between a really good city manager and a mediocre city manager?
wow. Well, that's a great question. The way I choose to, and I'm sure there's many answers, but what I would choose to use as my yardstick of how I'm doing is the city council, under a best practice, should adopt in each fiscal year or over a 2-year period, doesn't necessarily matter, but some goals and some objectives that they wish to achieve. And that goal and objective list should be reflected in your budget, your spending plan, and your city manager and your city staff should be instrumental in helping to shape that. And I think that's a great yardstick. How many of the goals and objectives were you able to, was the council able to achieve? You're the engine behind their achievement of their goals. Obviously, they don't have their own staff and that type of thing. So, and that's why you need to be very involved in it, because you need to have SMART goals that you can actually achieve.
I want to ask about that, because
Sure.
to point, maybe it's a subset of your question.
Sure.
How much, I see city managers also advise in some ways when the council goes into an area that they may not have expertise in. So does that seem like a fair way of saying, here's a strong city manager that is not telling them what to think, but helping them craft this initiative that they're
So in addition to being the CEO, you're the chief policy advisor. So, and you always have to stay neutral, obviously. You work for the entire council, you don't work for one or even the majority, you work for all of them. So you always try to give them something that they all can benefit from.
So it's not good, it's good practice for a city manager to not take a position on policy issues, to help clarify what the implications are, get information, or
the best practice is you should be offering a recommendation.
Okay.
Right, and so every staff report, that is going to come out, while I'm here, is going to always have a very clear recommendation as to what we want the council to do.
So here's a controversial issue.
Sure. Yeah.
Some people in the community think that the city shouldn't be in the business of making political statements.
Yes.
They think they ought to take care of the roads.
Yes. Yes.
And deal with
Yes.
traffic.
Yes.
And think about the best interest of the community.
Yes.
And so on, but that it is necessarily and by definition even a local thing
Yes.
that's happening. And
Yes.
they can have opinions about what we ought to do in the world.
I would agree with that sentiment.
You would?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and so to that end, at the second meeting in March, we're going to be bringing forward a proposed policy, just trying to rein in those things that we will be covering to those of local jurisdiction where we have control. And that's in formulation right now, and we'll see if we have 3 votes or more for it. I suspect we will.
You essentially did suggest that in the council. You didn't say don't do it, but I thought you strongly suggested this is not what the role of the city council should be, but then they elected to do it anyway. But.
And and there's fallout from that, obviously, and I also understand the political motivations for wanting to do that, of course. But
what do you think those are? Where I was going to go is to.
There are several. I think we can all probably list what they are, but there of course are some with. Of course, international concern for what is happening in the Middle East. Obviously, that's a concern, wherever you sit on the issue.
But why is that a local concern?
It's
What's
not.
the argument?
It's
I know
not.
you don't think that. I don't either, actually.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, I'm trying to understand the other point of view. The point of view that says, look.
Well, let me get to it.
Okay.
So I think I think if you're of that mindset, then the opinion is that. It's so outrageous. Everybody needs to be weighing in on this, and it's important for us as, and this is not my opinion, but this is as local leaders, you need to take a stand. That's basically the thought. But I would be of the mindset as their administrator that look, I want to make it through my business meeting with all the items on the agenda, and I want us to focus on what I tell them is the unsexy. Right? Let's talk about potholes.
You used that word before.
Yeah, let's talk about curb cuts. Let's talk about
Potholes are a pretty big deal when you blow out a tire.
Yes, they are.
On your way to
We
a
both
meeting.
have. We
Yes,
both
yeah, I'm
done
sure.
that.
I'm surprised that I don't have more claims for that.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not suggesting people that we file claims for that,
No.
but it just,
Well,
you know,
my
we're
insurance
working on
covered
that.
it nicely. Otherwise, because I
Looking to make our capital improvement program much more robust and much more regimented.
The people, though, just to answer your
Yeah.
question, they spoke. I don't have to even summarize what they said. I'm trying to say exactly what they said. They felt that it's so terrible what's happening that if enough cities got together, they would further pressure the federal government in a way that they were worried it's not moving fast enough. That was not that Ojai,
So
Ben,
it's
or
a
anybody
kind
could
of
do anything.
activism.
That's what it is.
Is that a way of putting it?
Yeah.
It's a kind of activism.
Yeah.
It's analogous to carrying a sign on the street,
Mm-hmm. Stronger.
being in a march of some kind,
I think that's fair.
civil disobedience
I think
of some
that's fair.
kind, to say this is so important and so serious that
Yeah.
we need to go to the street and yell if necessary
I
to
would
get
agree with
people's
that statement.
attention.
It's more powerful than the street, though. If a city says they're going, I'm not arguing for it. I don't think it was a good idea, but they're trying to say if a municipality feels this way, it carries more weight than us with signs in the street, because they were doing that already.
So
This was something happening as I was being brought on board, so the ship was sailing.
It was before you came. People were already at the
Yes,
meeting.
right. So what I'm hoping now is that, okay, we've had this moment. We obviously could continue to have this moment for a number of causes all year long, but my recommendation is let's just get back to what we're supposed to be
So now
doing.
there's an area that's a little to the side of that one,
Okay.
but that is kind of related, and that is regulatory actions that we hope will have a positive effect on the environment.
Okay.
Stoves,
Gas
remember
versus
the
electric.
gas
Reach
versus
codes,
electric.
reach
yeah,
codes,
yeah. One mode being better than the other for the environment.
As a city, you're able to adopt local building codes. That is one of your responsibilities, in fact. And so that is an area where you clearly have jurisdiction over that. And so you can make, that is something within a city or
So it's
county's
legal.
wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Not only is it legal, it's appropriate.
It's appropriate, good.
Right.
Yeah,
Now,
good.
whether or not one agrees or disagrees with the policy is a different decision, of course. But as far as like being things that a city has jurisdiction over, that they should deliberate, yes, absolutely.
So when you say it's appropriate, I think you're saying with respect to the rules, it's appropriate.
It's their purview.
That's right.
I
It's
think
within.
it's-
It's
not,
within.
not with respect to the effect that it might or might not have.
Right. And you're going to find me taking very, very few policy stances simply because in my role I'm working for a policy board and I'm driving the car.
Yep.
They're telling me where to go.
Yep.
I don't tell them.
Yep,
That's
yep.
a crummy drive.
Yep.
But we do
You know.
we do have feelings like we say we don't want there to be many-story buildings. For example, we want to
Yep.
encourage certain kinds of building materials.
Land use
Yeah,
is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, local jurisdiction.
Since we're on that subject,
Yeah.
I was going to save this for the end, but it just happened.
Yeah.
Can you help clarify what the council voted on Tuesday?
Sure.
So that tell me if I'm getting this right. So down sort of Ojai Avenue and then maybe a few blocks from Ojai Avenue, there was some conversation around might we open this up to residential building besides commercial building, and they said don't work on that anymore?
Yeah, so from the community outreach meetings that had been held, and these were before my time, regarding the general plan land use element, that was some feedback received from some in the meetings that this was something that maybe should be
Explore the idea of
explored.
houses in
Exactly,
the corridor. Okay.
Exactly. So, but council did not want that explored, and so we are going to be moving forward with a draft land use element of the general plan, which will come back before the council for review. But those items will not be included therein.
Yeah. So how much staff time had gone into working on those possibilities?
Oh,
much.
That's not a significant,
Okay.
And the bulk of the general plan update work has been contracted out.
Right.
The city doesn't have resources on hand, actually.
So you outsourced it.
Right.
And so is the question that, I'm just trying to understand the policy implications or the outcomes actually. So the initiative initially was, could we think of the possibility of residential units either down Ojai Avenue or close to it? Now the danger would have been if somebody came in like Cabrillo Vista, for example, and said, we have this affordable housing project that meets all the state requirements, it would be hard to say no to that.
Well,
we don't want
if
that
you
there?
allow for a housing use in an overlay like that, then you are subject to state regulations of housing.
Right. Was that the main reason to not want it?
I think that's what I heard from I heard a couple things. I heard that. I also heard some that felt that that just was not within the character of what they wanted to see in that area.
Downtown.
Yeah.
I mean, downtown Ojai.
Yeah, and I also heard that some felt that that wasn't a prevailing community opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Those were all kind of things I heard that evening.
Because to me, that falls exactly into your question, which is what should they be thinking about and working on? And that would be one, is what kind of buildings would we like to see and where, in the city?
And so that's very much happening right now and will be happening right now. And there's plenty of opportunity for public participation and involvement. And we're going to be publishing a general plan update calendar so people can be aware.
Yeah.
They'll have the opportunity to weigh in on the drafts. And so that's, I think there was a feeling by some that, oh my gosh, I got to hurry up, the ship is sailing, and if I don't, it's going to be cemented. No, it's still in the very early.
Yeah, well, it was said in the paper's reporting of it. If somebody wanted to build a mixed-use thing, they could come and go through the planning commission and all that.
So and that's true too.
It doesn't preclude it.
That's
right?
true. They can. You can always submit an application.
Yeah. So different. This is related to when you first were thinking about coming to Ojai. This is like a two-part question. One is, how did you learn about Ojai before applying and going forward in the position? And then the second part is, do you see Ojai as facing the same kinds of problems as other cities of our size and character, or do you see anything unique about Ojai?
Okay, so the first part's kind of fun. I grew up in San Luis Obispo. Actually, to our earlier conversation, I did not grow up in San Luis Obispo. I grew up in San Luis Obispo County, just outside the city limits. But I went to San Luis Obispo High School and schools and all that stuff. Anyway, as growing up, we would come down to Ojai for vacations and we'd go to the Ojai Valley Inn and other places. And so I always had very fond memories of Ojai. As an adult, I came back here later to do some hiking and enjoy that type of thing. So I've always been fond of Ojai. We've got friends that live in the greater area, so it's an awesome place. I mean, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
I think that's the first part of your question. That's how I know about Ojai.
Yep.
And sorry, forgive me, the second part of the question?
What, do you see Ojai as unique, or is it sharing the same problems that all other small cities that are also tourist destinations have?
Well, Ojai is unique. Every small town is unique, okay? And there's always something that makes it a little bit different. But no, the challenges are similar to those in the other small cities where I've also been city manager. Avalon on Catalina Island, believe it or not, has some things in common. Pacific Grove in Monterey County, where it was just before this, has some things in common. There are some differences, but overall, a lot of the things that you're facing here are also being faced by small cities up and down.
How across the state, small towns, how much variation is there in the quality of city government?
Oh, the quality of city government, huge.
Are there some that are really stars? That, in other words, are there some that are,
yes.
But here, let me tell you what I mean by a star.
Sure.
Contributing to the best interest of the community in a significant way. So we have, here's an example, we have a lot of very prominent and wealthy people moving into Ojai currently who have no sense of community at all.
Yes.
It's a vacation resort place, and I'd love to have a second home there. And they got a great golf course, and they've got some good restaurants, and they lovely mountains, and it's a great weekend retreat.
Right.
I don't place myself as a member of the community. I place myself as a visitor who gets to go to this nice place. I don't pay taxes for that much of property. I have
pay significant
related
property taxes.
Okay. But I don't pay a price for, I mean, if I have a home, I pay taxes on the home. I don't pay a price to live in this lovely valley much, other than the price of the house, which may be huge. But with respect to the community, it's free for me. I get the community for free.
Somewhat, right. So the city, one of the city's core revenue sources is property tax, of course. So we do get a good chunk of that.
Okay, but I don't. There's no obligation for me to participate.
That is true. And that is true of also that's true of anybody who is there in town 7 days a week. Okay, so Pacific Grove and Avalon both struggled with this, and many towns struggle with it. And you see some towns implementing a second homes tax, if you will. Very hard to enforce, right? Very hard to enforce.
What about a mansion tax? That would be easier. That's a threshold.
Well, or what about not a tax? What about some friendly way of saying, hey, you just came to Ojai, welcome. We're really glad you're here, and let me tell you the 17 ways you can contribute. We've got some issues here that you you might want to fund a project for our local school district. We have
baskets,
7
like
of
a welcome
those that you
basket.
could choose from.
Some of the
you might want to deal with the fact that we have homeless people living outside in tents, etc.
I would agree that it's something that we need to figure out how to connect with those residents that are in the situation. I think that's kind of the problem right there. It's hard to figure out how often to connect with some of these folks. Have the same issue in Avalon, same issue in Pacific Grove. Some of these people are all over the place all the time. You often don't even know that they reside in the house because they actually don't own the house. Maybe an LLC owns the house, or maybe it's a family trust or whatever.
So can I ask
and then you don't know how to get to them, right? Because people's cell phones and email addresses are largely unknown unless you do a lot of digging, and what's on the property tax roll is definitely not where they're looking.
Is it within the purview of the city council to say, when you move here, you have to meet with people and say hello?
How could you do that?
You can encourage that. I mean, I think
you couldn't
I think
make it a
that's beyond
regulation.
the city. I think that the city could be a part of that, but that kind of, you always want to encourage and not enforce.
Yeah,
and I think that if as a community, if you have that vibe and you throw it out there that hey, this is an awesome place, I'm so glad you're here. I'll give you a little Shaggy Dog story that might illustrate it a little bit. So, though I grew up in San Luis Obispo County, my parents in their later years moved to Texas, okay? For economic reasons. My father got a great job, and so I spend a lot of my time when I'm not in California in Texas because I'm visiting my parents. And it's a palpable, different vibe when you're in Texas versus other states. And Texas, is so glad to have you. Right?
Yeah.
They want to have you. They're glad you're there. They don't care where you're from. They don't care how long you've been there. And so I'm not saying that the Texas model is one that we should adopt, but it is something to consider. It's a very welcoming place. It's a very encouraging place, and it's maybe having that type of mentality, calibrating it correctly for California and for Ojai might be something we look at. But when I go there, it's very friendly. And people are happy to see you. And I'm going to just pause for a moment. Ojai is that little small town, and I tell people when they ask me, excuse me, what do you think about being in Ojai now? And I tell them it's like living in old California. But I mean that in the best possible way. We were talking about the guy riding the horse around my neighborhood earlier, but people here wave when you see them on the road, and I don't know them. I wave back.
Yeah.
That's so I think that we have some of the bones. The other thing that Ojai has, which is maybe sets it a little bit apart, is some people live in compounds, so it's harder to know the guy behind that wall.
That's true. Can I ask though on the same subject? I'm curious. Besides people that live here, but when we talk about cities that are doing this really well. And when I say doing it really well, I guess I'm thinking, you have pressure for people who want to live here because it's so attractive. So the housing prices are high and the rents are high, so that's a pressure. We have a middle class that's having a hard time. They're struggling, and we see that in like our public school numbers declining, being in half, and so on, things that you already know. So balancing these competing kind of priorities and interests. Are there cities who the council and the staff are working really in sync to manage those priorities, balance them? That's I think embedded in your question.
I know there are. I don't at the top of my head. I don't have a list of those cities that are hitting it out of the park in that area. But I will tell you that communities where I've lived, it's just fostering that sense of being in a place. I think community events are a great way to do it. I think that we have some terrific opportunities which I've not participated in yet, but which I really want to know about. The Libby Park Concert Bowl series. That seems to me like an amazing chance to probably foster some community feelings, right? And maybe
Sure.
expand what that is and what that could mean.
There's dozens of those things, yeah.
Exactly. Ojai Days, Ojai Day, excuse me. I'm excited. I've not done that before. I'm excited to see what that's all about and see how that could.
Well, like just to be more pointed now, in our community, it seems to me, the past 2 cycles maybe or something like that, I think my sense is people feel discouraged and they're worried about the council working with the staff and going through 2 city managers, for example. So, and Andrea shared these numbers with me, but the legal expenses have doubled since 2018. So we're worried about how well is it functioning. That's not just us, but we hear this pretty regularly, a general concern about how things are going, and that I know we don't want to be so divisive and say there are 2 camps. There's many, many camps, many interests, but let's say generally speaking, there seems to be a polarized community. So I guess.
Well, and I would say it even
please.
stronger, and a dysfunctional city council.
Okay.
I mean, that's the general, of the people that I know in Ojai, the general view is we have a dysfunctional city council. And it's worse. I mean, I've been here 30 years. I've been here 40 years. It's worse than it's ever been. I mean, it's absurdly poor. The meetings that you observe are just off the chart.
Well, just to be fair, not everybody feels that way, but a lot of people do.
Yeah, so we're trying, and I think there's recognition on the council's part that they're trying to address that, and that was part of what I talked about when I was brought on board, and so that goes back to me talking about the importance of goals and objectives that are achievable, and really having that as our North Star, and getting back to the unsexy, and really focusing on issues of local interest. And then what I tell them also is, we're also going to have to look for the concentric circles. Okay, and I know that you're going to be over here and you're going to be over here, and I'm not trying to change that, but think about what you have in common.
What's the overlap?
Right, and that's in the compromise, and that will only come with time, right? I just got here, and we'll see if I can be impactful in that area. I might not be able to. I don't know, but I'm going to certainly try, because it makes my job and the mission of the municipal organization easier, and we can be more effective too.
Of course.
And also, to be fair, there will naturally be an up and down in this respect, because you have elections and you have new people coming in, and you don't know what the mix is going to be.
That's right.
And we serve on boards too. We know there's a director and there's boards, and board members change, and there's tension, and sometimes there's a lot of coalescing, and
it's the same thing.
Of course, yes.
So it's not like it's endemic. It's not like it's always been problematic.
Right.
There have been very good city councils.
But also, this is not just an Ojai issue. This is nationwide. You're seeing.
Is that right?
Yes, right. That's right.
What's the cause? What's happening?
Well, I would argue, and there's been a lot written about this, that a lot of it comes from national politics, right? National politics have also become much more divisive, and I'm old enough, and everybody here in this room is old enough to remember, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, and the days when you'd reach across the aisle and you'd give and trade.
Well, is another way of saying it what we were talking. We did a whole series on American history. It took about 2 years, but there became a period of time when people that had opposing views from you were acknowledged and part of the system by design.
That's right.
But now people who have, yes, of course, now people who have other views, for example, I think we should have more housing. Oh my gosh, you want to grow Ojai in a way that's going to kill Ojai.
Right.
Now the other person seems like a traitor, not just another view.
Right.
So it's happening nationally, obviously. That's easy to see, but it has happened, I would say, the past 4 years here.
It's definitely trickled down to all levels of government. That's what I've seen. And the council where I came from also was very divided.
It was,
Yeah, and I think that's a trend that you're just unfortunately seeing in a lot of places.
So it's part of the civil war that's about to
And
erupt.
your suggestion is that the council, I know what the council had tried to do was to have kind of a workshop to work on this stuff, and they couldn't agree on the terms, I guess. So they couldn't do the workshop. But your suggestion is, hey, look at, as you say, concentric circles. Where do you overlap? Where can you find a balance?
So one thing we're going to do that may help is we're also going to bring back a code of conduct, and and we're going to take it seriously, because it's in the same category as adhering to the formalities in a meeting, right? Having the communication go through the mayor, not having crosstalk, using people's title in the meeting. it slows things down, it makes it more deliberative.
That's worth it.
And it seems silly and flowery, but there's a real reason for it, because that way you can hear. We're having crosstalk here because this is an interview, but in a business meeting, I want to hear you finish your sentence, and then I'm going to ask if I may go next, or
and if I address you by your last name or your formal name, that is a sign of respect and distance, and that's all good stuff.
That's good.
So you nailed it. So that is another tool we're going to try to bring forward, and I have an example I want them to consider. And then there are consequences if you're out of bounds, right? Your colleagues can take you to task, right?
So going back just to the former topic. Well, first I want to ask, do you agree with what I'm about to say? And then if you do, what to do about it? You don't have to agree in whole.
All right.
What I have heard and what I've observed is what I mentioned earlier, which is housing prices being so much higher than they used to be, and basically all the job growth that we've paid attention to has been in the service industry, not in the professional or manager industry. And that we look at Ojai Unified, not just that they had a financial crisis and consolidated. They should have consolidated 10 years before, which they will acknowledge. So we have basically like a 48 or 50% public school enrollment from 20 years ago as an indicator. So the way that I see it is that this pressure that we have from being an attractive place to be in housing prices is pushing this idea that we will have a homegrown, long-time community of middle-class people that are here. So I guess when I see the problem is, how do we figure out how to have more affordable housing on the one hand? How do we also then figure out how to have higher paying jobs here? Those two things together, that's what I see as a key focus area. If you agree, I would love to hear your view. If you don't, but if you do, then what can we do about it?
Right. Well, this is the big question, right? And I don't think nobody's figured it out.
Yeah.
This is not unique to Ojai. This is the problem that all desirable, affluent, communities are struggling with. And I think that the first part I think is an easier one to answer, which is we have to think about housing really in every type of land use decision that we make going forward. Really, almost all decisions, because it doesn't help us if we're relying on a workforce that has to drive,
in and out.
In and out. It chokes our roads and all. Forget that part. Think about the existence of those who, a big chunk of their day is spent in a car worrying about getting their kid to some school in a different jurisdiction, getting to the after-school components of that. So that's something I think that we all have to think about. Like, what type of place do we want to live? Do we want, I come from Monterey County. Do we want to live in Pebble Beach? There's a gate. You can pay to go in. Otherwise, you don't go in. Right. And when you're in Pebble Beach, it's lovely, but there's no life. Right. It's a bunch of quiet, mostly empty homes. There's no downtown. There's some retail around the resort.
It's not a community.
Not a community. So what you'd see is people in Pebble Beach going into Pacific Grove because that's where the hardware store was. That's where the gas station is. Whatever. So we have to think about, we have to, all those things that we value having in our town, we have to figure out how we continue to have them. And you probably have read articles recently. I think there was one, was it the New York Times, the LA Times, just yesterday, talking about the death of the local restaurant, right? That how a $16 cheeseburger isn't enough even to keep it in business anymore. It's much, much, much more than that. Do we value local restaurants? Okay, if we do, what do we do to make sure that they stick around? That makes a community. That was one part of your question. The other part of the question was, forgive me.
Well, housing one, business is the other. So, for example, I brought up this building.
Oh, job attraction.
Yeah, job attraction. So, I'm going to quote James Vega, the next to last former. He said, we've deliberately made it hard by design for businesses or new things to start here because we want to do it very carefully and deliberately. And I agree with that. No problem there. But if a business wanted to be here to locate that was clean, they were, let's say, a consulting company or something like that, people working on their computers, sometimes the hoops are so large and the goalposts keep moving in the planning commission, et cetera, they pull out. We have many examples of that.
Well, and I would see that as part of my role, and that's what I saw as my job in other places I've been, and I've had good community development departments there too. I think I've got a good director and department here as well, and I think that I would, if you have an audience here that has people with business ideas. I want to hear them. And you know, what I tell people is just tell me what's hard, and then we can take a look at it. You know, is this something that can be legislatively undone? Is this something within my authority to do something about? I don't know, but let me at least work on it.
Yeah.
Right?
Because what we've heard
sometimes
is,
it's a use that's not allowed. That's harder, right?
Of
You know, okay, you need me to get the planning commission to change the use for this zone. Well, I don't think that an amusement park is going to really fit in this. You know, whatever. That's a terrible example.
I get it.
You know,
we're going to have pot, but not an amusement park.
Well, let me use a real specific example.
Right.
Now, I don't know the details on this, but I do want to ask about it.
Yeah.
So, for example, the old Suzanne's, that restaurant that's over there. So if you head down, it's almost to Bristol, not quite if you're heading out of town.
Okay.
On the
I
right.
might not even know where this place is.
That's okay. It's a restaurant that used to be vibrant, and they closed on their own for their own reasons, but it's been vacant for a long time.
Okay.
There's another example right over here, Casa de Lagos. In both of those cases, what I have heard, needing to verify, people have been interested in reopening a restaurant there, but now the ordinances, there isn't enough parking with the current. So then, when I look at a situation like that and say, there used to be restaurants here that were working, and we say, if I understand it correctly, hey, the spirit of the law is you want to make sure there's enough parking. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
The letter of the law is you're stopping a business from opening where one would have been there before.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with El Roblar before your time. It was the Oaks.
Right.
They came and wanted to start something new. It had closed.
Yeah.
Now people were upset. I think they just didn't want the El Roblar to be there.
Right.
So they said there's not enough parking.
Right.
And then they said, we'll have valet parking.
Right.
Well, let's try to stop the valet.
Right.
So that to me, when I think of the spirit of the law in the letter, what I have said to council people is, we are small enough and supple enough, why can't we look at what would be this balance, this concentric circle of best interest, instead of just saying no or just stopping.
So I really see that as part of my
please.
job. I really see that, you know, and that's what I tried to do where I've been before is, you know, have people come to me. What's the idea? What's the problem? Okay, is it something I can address?
So that's a huge deal. And if you're able to improve that by 20%, it would make a huge difference.
It'd be gigantic.
And I'm not going to, you know, there are some things that are beyond my control that are harder to address. Like, so for instance, if you're doing restaurants, you know, and remember, we don't have our own health department. Right. We're a small little city. That's not abnormal. So we're under the county system. So then
getting good information from a cooperative person who would take your situation seriously would be a huge benefit.
Right. Well, and that's part of my job. And so I have Bridget in my office, and I've just tasked Bridget with doing is, you know, these requests are going to come in. I need you to make sure that these people get, not these people, anyone who wants to talk to me, you know, give them their time so I can at least try to see if I can address it.
Right. I'll give you an example. This building that we're in, which we built 20-some years ago, we wanted to sell it.
Okay.
We had a buyer.
Okay.
The buyer, it was in escrow.
Okay.
The buyer went over to the city to talk to them, to see kind of what things were like.
Yeah.
And he pulled the plug and decided not to buy it.
Wow.
And the reason, he said, is that he felt like he couldn't possibly deal with that mentality of person.
Wow. What year was that? Do you recall?
That was 2015.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing, I tell you that as a personal story, but that story can be told by...
Oh, sure.
So we had to hire a lawyer.
Oh, wow.
The lawyer had to go and read the documents that were in the possession of the city. They hadn't read those documents with respect to zoning. We were arbitrarily told that we were in the wrong zone. We'd been here 20 years. Our lawyer had to go read the documents himself and then interpret them to the city to get them to realize that they didn't understand their own rules and they were telling us that we were illegally here. That was just incompetent stuff that went on.
Well, let me use another example is I live in the Golden West neighborhood, and there's the vacant bowling alley that's been vacant for however many decades. And
I met the owners of that.
Oh, okay, good. Well, tell me.
They don't live too far away from me.
Oh, good. Well, just now again, this is not to say it's slam dunk. It's complicated. There was a movement to have a boutique hotel and brewery there. That was stopped. And so, not that I want more hotels or more breweries. Not that at all. But just simply to say, it continues to be just sitting there vacant.
Yeah,
And-
so I did meet them at a
Oh,
chamber
good.
event not long ago.
Great.
Like I said, they're local people that live near me. They've got some other businesses in town. They wanted to talk about it, but they weren't ready to talk about it at the chamber mixer. I said,
Sure.
great, let's hear what you want to do.
Yeah.
I just basically left them. I'm excited that you own it and that you want to do something with
I'm
it.
excited too.
So let's talk about it.
It just looks, I mean, I know what people say on Facebook and next door is they say, why can't the city open a bowling alley there? And I don't engage in that. But what I would say
Yeah.
is, if you want to open a bowling alley, you do it. The cities
Well,
don't open bowling alleys.
Right.
You know?
So that's the funny part. So if the use is allowed and you have the wherewithal to do it, then go forth, right? I mean, that's
course.
really basically what it is. We don't stop that.
Right.
But what I want to try to do, and so I will stay in touch with these people, is try to encourage them. Hey,
Yeah.
what
sure.
is it? Is it money? And that could be it, right? It's very expensive to rehab a building and open something, and maybe they're
course.
raising cash, or maybe they're getting investors. Who knows what, right?
I heard
And
a
that's not
rumor-
illegal, right? That's the other thing. Is you
No,
just
of
tell
course.
people like, hey, and I don't want to go code enforce people to death while they're trying to make something move forward. But if it gets really to the point of serious blight, obviously we'll have to do that. But I'd much rather say like, hey, can I join you with somebody? Do you need me to connect you with somebody? Yeah, maybe I have somebody that would help you. I don't know what it is, but
That's the spirit that I think we
Yeah.
are talking about,
Yeah.
which is, hey,
Right.
what can we do together? Like, yes, maybe we don't want another hotel and brewery. Okay, fine, but let's.
or maybe we do.
Or whatever. But I think we don't want a vacant lot.
Right.
And especially when that probably looks like Chernobyl inside. I'm just guessing. I have no idea.
Yeah,
but,
I've never been inside, so
Nobody would want to go inside. But
yeah.
but I guess.
But
what I
judging
mean
by the
is
other
working
business that
together.
they own,
Yeah.
I can tell you that they care about the community. They're local,
Yeah, good.
and I think that they're younger, and not that is everything, but they've got more time to get things done.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
and
that's
they
good.
might have a lens that I don't have because they're at least 10 years younger than me. So
No, that's good.
yeah.
Good.
What's the relationship of city government to public education?
It's a collaborative one in the best of circumstances, but as I say that to you, I need to go meet my counterparts at the school district,
Sure.
and I have not yet done that. That's on my list. Usually in a city, you have reciprocal agreements with facilities and resources, and you try to figure out ways that you don't have to go buy a new building or rent a new field, or you try to see what you can share and do together. And so again, that is something, shame on me, I've not gotten to that
That's
yet,
good.
but I fully intend to meet with the superintendent and some of the
Cheryl.
school board members and
We
figure
just
out.
interviewed them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
I was just going to say, they're intending to pursue a district housing project
Yes.
at the downtown property
Yes.
and
Yes.
move the admin offices to Matilaha.
Yeah.
And so what I was thinking was, here's a great opportunity where the city can become true partners with OUSD to say, what can we do to support you in this thing that could help solve this problem that we're talking about right now, where there is more housing there?
Right.
The facades, not just the facade, but the whole front stays there as historic preservation. So that part's fine, but maybe that turns into shops or something, whatever. But it seems to me that's a place where the whole community could get behind it if people don't get into their silos, right? Into their trenches fighting about more houses downtown.
Right. They do have some autonomy from the city.
They do.
And so that, with the school district, it's definitely more, trying to cooperate. You can't regulate them the way you would other.
So there's no formal relationship in terms of supervision or
No, in fact,
allowances
it's
or-
quite the opposite. They're under the state.
Yeah.
But they
Yeah,
could,
state,
for
state
example,
architecture's office actually, controls what they're able to do with their.
here's though
their
what would
property.
happen though, if I understand correctly. Let's say they wanted to, which this was a project before your time, if they wanted to work with a developer to build a hotel on one of the properties, the city would have to address the zoning. So it's true, they're not under each other, but they are sharing land use.
Yeah.
So
And
they
the
could
city
be
sets what the
cooperative or not.
zoning is. It's just, there are certain, it's a little grayer with the school district as
Right.
far as what they're able to do.
Yeah. But again, you could have a partner, right? And I think they would like that too. And I think maybe they haven't felt that lately, but I think it would be good.
Yeah, it's on my list.
No, great. And
Yeah.
I think the council too. The council should be meeting with them more regularly. So can I ask though about the legal expenditure? Is that number accurate? Double
I'd
from
have,
2018?
I'd have to go look at that.
Okay.
I don't know off the top of my head. But I will tell you this.
Yes.
When you're in a small city, and remember this is coming from somebody who's been in 2 small cities, you are going to have a little bit of an outsized legal bill for a couple of reasons. One, you have a small staff, and a lot of times you don't have somebody on staff to do or to chase down the question. And you know, a lot of times these larger city law firms have that expertise and wherewithal, and sometimes you need something expeditiously, and that's a way to get the information, and you know it's going to be sound.
I don't think outsized is the issue. I think trending upward is the issue.
Yeah, and I'd have to look to that. I mean, I don't know that it's. I mean, that might be accurate, but I also don't know, and I don't know. Also, I'd have to look at what happened between 18 and now. Was there a large lawsuit? Was there some, you know, some extraordinary litigation expense?
I think the answer is an increasing threat of litigation from groups about what we're talking about. Parking, about valet parking, or something like the El Roblar opening, or the Becker Group as a great example, that you had a nonprofit threatening litigation that took that project and moved it a year out. So that was all cost. So it wasn't like, oh great, we voted on it, wait, affordable housing, awesome. No, not at all. It took a year of, you know, silo building and legal fees to finally get us where what we could have been before, albeit with more density but more affordable housing. That's, I think that's the cause of the increase, but that's something that we could look at. That to me goes to the tenor of where we are, that people would like to see change, the cooperation where we actually overlap instead of we're fighting each other and threatening court.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I'd like a less litigious approach to everything. I'm not, you know.
Yeah, who wants it?
Yeah, I think that's something we all have in common. I mean, it also goes to trying to get your council to work together. And
yeah.
Just an observation that you might find interesting on the split, we were talking earlier about how things have polarized and it makes it difficult for people to talk to each other and all that. We started, what, 10 years ago doing panels on
2014
on controversial issues. So we thought, why not get a group of people together who are experts on a subject, some on one side and some on the other, and then have a genuine exchange without a point of view, without trying to convince anybody of anything, but just to sort of enlighten the audience. So we started with genetically modified food as the topic in Ojai. That's a very big deal. There's a strong, healthy sort of community, health-oriented community that thinks that genetically modified foods are dangerous and horrible and should be regulated tightly and prohibited. And there are farmers here, major farmers. So it was kind of a big issue. And we got some good people on both sides of that issue, and we got them to talk to each other and to the audience. We had it at the Ojai Valley Inn. We had a couple of hundred people at our first event. And then we did immigration back then, when it actually should have been addressed early, 10 years ago.
Not just Ojai immigration, but in general.
Immigration broadly. And we just did the most controversial topics we could find. But here's the thing that's interesting that I wanted to pass on to you. The more educated we got, the less the division.
Sure.
So in every one of those cases, I mean, we did about 10 of those. We did water, really controversial, difficult stuff. In every case, it started here. Fracking, we did fracking. Started here, and it came down to here by the end of the panel.
So
we've done 30 different kinds of events since 2014.
So I'm coming from Monterey County, and you may have heard of a guy named Leon Panetta.
Of course.
And anyway, he runs, he is a nonprofit now, the Panetta Institute, and he has an annual speaking, it's not a speaking engagement, it's a lecture series, if you will. And so he deliberately picks political figures, and sometimes polarizing ones, and then brings them together, and he moderates, and it's masterful. But it's the same. It's the same. I think those are terrific. I think those are. It's beneficial to any community that has that. So that's great that you do those here.
Thank you.
Would love to know more about the series, so I can.
They're all there. They're all recorded. You can check them out.
We were slowed down by COVID a lot.
Yes.
So we're getting ready to gear up again.
Well, one of the panels that we're working on right now actually is cities that are doing it right, that are balancing this thing. So we're seeking out people. I've reached out to some council members also to say, with your participation in California cities, what are some cities that you think are getting at this balance and working on different kind of solutions, maybe innovative ones to address this thing? Before I get to maybe a final question, because we're getting close on time, do you feel like the budget's in a healthy situation as you come into it and see where we're at? Meaning the right amount of reserve is there, the sound accounting for revenue is there, et cetera?
Yeah, so we just went through a mid-year budget update. First one the city's done in some time. Yes, we are structurally balanced with adequate reserves according to policy. And we have finance staff who have the right pedigree to be there. What I'm going to be doing is bringing in a third party, someone in a firm that I've used in a different jurisdiction, to kind of review operations and give us some assistance and guidance and sharpening and best practices and maybe making some modifications, et cetera, et cetera. Somebody with decades of experience in this that is not a threatening person but a helpul person. And again, we have a good finance department. It's a lot of folks that just are fairly newer in the role, and maybe even in the industry. And government accounting is its own animal, and you really have to. It's different than private sector accounting, and there's more accountability and responsibility and reporting and different requirements, and you just have to know all of that.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
So, but I mean, what I told the council coming in is, the pie, only grows incrementally, right? So if you're asking me, am I going to come in here and identify some amazing new revenue source? No. Not if you want to keep the character of your community, which I know you do.
Yes. Right.
So it's only going to grow incrementally, and if you want to change a priority, then another slice of the pie gets a little smaller. That's how it works.
Are you seeing a revenue growth potential coming on the November ballot one way or another?
No.
You're not? Not even like a 1% sales tax or a TOT increase?
No, nobody in the council has expressed that as an interest. I mean, I'm not saying that they couldn't bring it forward. And sure, but what I've told them is, that, okay, and I'm coming from a high tax city. I mean, Pacific Grove was the last in Monterey County to raise it up to the cap. And
you said it was like 9 something, right?
Yeah, 9.25.
And we're 7.25.
Right. So now, here's what I'll tell you, and I have not done the study here, but when we did the study in Pacific Grove, the majority of sales tax was actually borne by a visitor. And that probably is going to be the case here as well.
That's what I was thinking.
But you'd have to do the study and look at the receipts to find that out.
Anecdotally, people seem to suggest
and you have to look at what neighboring jurisdictions are charging. Now, I will tell you that Ojai, this is my crystal ball, and maybe it broke years ago, but I would predict that if you did increase it, it would probably be something that would not be impactful to people living here so much.
That's what I've heard. Now, because what I would say...
But it would probably be impactful to your municipal operations. So you could do things like if you wanted to have, and I'd have to look at the yield potential, but I mean, a 1% increase could be a sizable change in the net that you receive. You'd want to, obviously, if you did something like that, have some very serious policy discussions about what the money would be used for. Kind of like with Measure C, right? Where you have to, and maybe you want to use it for public safety. Maybe you want to, I don't know what. The concern that you always have from an administrator perspective is you don't want to make it a special tax.
Yeah.
Because then that requires a 2/3 approval, and those are very hard to get adopted.
Understood. Here's
the other thing you don't want is you don't want a sunset usually, because what happens is that.
You mean that means a duration in time?
You don't want to have it end specific, right?
Understood.
Right. I mean, but I think doing things like parameters for what the types of things that you want it spent on, or an oversight body or something like that are all healthy and good.
I was going to suggest that the timetable for the road repair accelerate.
And that's great.
And add the 1% sales tax.
And that's a perfect example, something like that. Like, the reason why I want this is for the following. This is what I want to see and what I do. And that's...
Because I think some people see their road on the list that has been moved back last year now to something like, 2026.
Right.
And it is terrible. It's in terrible shape. And they think, I understand it takes time, but what can we do?
Right.
And I was thinking the 1% sales tax would be
No,
one thing.
there
to
certainly
consider.
is room, and I'd have to look at what the other jurisdictions in the area are charging. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think
We're
Ventura
low, I
County
believe.
overall is lower overall. And you don't have a big box here, and so you don't have people fleeing, one place to go to another. This is, sales tax mostly from people going to your, shops and restaurants.
As you say,
and
tourists coming in.
visitors, right?
I don't know if you, I wanted to ask you just as a closing question, unless you have another one.
No, I think we're getting on time.
We are.
Yeah.
What do you, just anything you would like to add? What would you like to accomplish for the rest of the year? Anything you would like to say? You'd like to do?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate that very much. I would like to have a good sense of really what Ojai is. And I think that's really, it's going to take some time, and I would be delusional if I listen to the answers I've given you to some of your questions. There's still so many relationships I don't have, so many things I don't know about. So my goal for the rest, the time this year is really trying to understand issues and things that matter in the community. And it takes a good year or even two to really understand what you're dealing with and what matters and why. And so that's my goal, is to make sure, listen more, talk less, explore things, ask a lot of questions. That's what I'm going to be doing. Not pretending that I know or that I have the answer for everything, because I don't. But we'll get there.
Yeah.
And really trying to help my council, trying to help them be the best group of policymakers they can be. That'd be my other goal.
Those are great goals.
But I thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It's
this
nice
is
to
great.
talk to you.
Yeah,
It
likewise.
is nice to talk to you. I bet
Good.
we'll talk a lot more.
Good. Hope so.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yep.
Yeah, very, very good.